Most aspirants don't fail because they don't read NCERTs. They fail because they read them the wrong way. If you have completed NCERTs and still can't solve PYQs, one of these 7 mistakes is probably the reason. Hello everyone, my name is Rajni Jha. Welcome to Drishti IAS. In today's session, we are going to talk about the 7 mistakes you might be making while reading NCERTs. Let's get started. The first mistake is reading passively instead of asking questions while reading. Normally, students start reading NCERTs like novel, line by line, page by page, and what that does is that creates familiarity without creating understanding. So you'll feel like you know the subject, you know the concept, you know the topic, but you won't be able to recall them or solve questions based on them because understanding was not developed. So what you need to do instead? You should be asking questions from the text. For example, if NCERT says the Himalayas influence the Indian monsoon, you should ask yourself, how do they influence it? Why is this important? What happens if Himalayas didn't exist? Or has UPSC asked something related to this before or not? The second mistake is highlighting everything so nothing stands out. The purpose of highlighting is to ensure that this part, the highlighted part, is the important part, to separate the highlighted part, the important part, from the rest of the text. But if you highlight everything, nothing is actually important for you. And a good rule of thumb is if you have highlighted 15 to 20% of the entire text, then probably you're highlighting too much. So what you need to do? You should only highlight definitions, keywords, dates if they are important, cause-effect relationships and exceptions. Also, you should not be highlighting the first time you're reading the text because at that point, everything seems important. The next mistake is making notes from the first reading. From the first reading itself, if you start making notes, you'll be copying everything that is given in the book because everything seems important. So you should not be making notes from the first reading. Instead, in the first reading, you should be focusing on familiarizing yourself with the topic, understanding the topic by asking questions. In the second reading, you'll identify important points. And then this is the stage where you start highlighting also. And in the third reading, then you start making short revision-friendly notes only if necessary because you don't have to make notes of every chapter, every NCERT, only the important ones. The next mistake is not revising regularly, assuming one reading is enough. There is something called forgetting curve by Ebbinghaus, which says that you forget most of what you have read if you don't revisit it. So if you do not revise what you have read, you are going to forget all of it after a point of time. In fact, in the next 24 to 48 hours, you forget most of what you have read. So you should be revisiting, revising everything that you have studied. How can you do that? By spaced repetition. What is spaced repetition? You will repeat those things in certain spaces, regular spaces. So let's say you read something today. Now you have to revise it within the next 24 to 48 hours when the maximum forgetting happens. Then you should revise it again after 1 week, then after 1 month. By doing this, you'll be able to remember most of it for a very long time. Then of course, at the end, you have prepared your notes, the short notes, you can revise them right before prelims and mains. The next mistake is ignoring PYQ, so you don't know what UPSC usually asks. If you don't know what UPSC asks, you are going to see everything as important. Everything becomes, every text, every line, every concept becomes equally important. But once you analyze UPSC question papers, the PYQs, you'll realize that there are certain concepts, certain themes which are repeatedly asked. So while you're reading text, you'll know that these are the concepts that you should be focusing more on. So what you should be doing instead is, let's say you started reading Polity. Before reading it, go through the PYQs so that you have some idea as to what kind of questions are asked. Of course, you won't understand a lot of it because by now you don't have the basic concept understanding, right? But go through PYQs once, then read the text, and then after you have read the chapter, solve relevant PYQs. At this point, by this point, you'll be able to understand this is the concept that has been asked over and over. So you'll notice the concepts UPSC repeatedly tests or asks. And if you feel like this is the concept that you still face problem in, go back to the text and strengthen those areas. That's how you proceed. Before we talk about the next mistake, my NCERT live classes are going on YouTube, absolutely free of cost, every day at 5 p.m. from Monday to Friday. I hope to see you all in those classes. Now, what is the sixth mistake that you might be making, which is reading without connecting topics? Now, UPSC examination is not just about fact check. It asks questions from interdisciplinary perspective. So your questions are asked by connecting it to different subjects. This is called interdisciplinary perspective, and you should have an interdisciplinary approach. So while reading a topic, you should see which other concepts, which other topics, which other subjects are connected to this topic. For example, you're reading monsoon. You know that monsoon can be asked in geography, monsoon can be asked in disaster management. Then monsoon also connects with other areas. What areas? So for example, it connects with geography, agriculture, economy, disaster management, environment. It connects with so many different subjects. So while reading a concept, the first thing that you should ask yourself is, which other topics is it related to and which other subjects is it related to? Where else does this concept appear? And you start making connections and then understand the topic. Thus, the more connections you make, the stronger your conceptual understanding becomes. And finally, the seventh mistake is trying to memorize instead of understanding. As I've already told you, that UPSC questions are application based, understanding based, analytical questions. And if you want to solve analytical questions, understanding based questions, you should also develop understanding rather than mugging up facts. Now, of course, remembering facts is an important part of this entire preparation. But if you only focus on remembering facts and not seeing how it affects different things, the application of it, you won't be able to solve questions in the examination. So let's say in economics, rather than just memorizing what is inflation or fiscal deficit, understand how they affect people's life, how they affect government decisions. That's how you go about the preparation of UPSC, right? So that's it for today's session. In this session, we saw the 7 mistakes you could be making, and I make sure I keep in mind that while teaching NCERTs, my students don't make these mistakes. So my classes go on YouTube live every day 5 p.m. sharp from Monday to Friday. I hope to see you all there. This is it for today's session, and I will come up with more sessions. If you have any specific request, if you want to know about specific things, you can always drop them down in the comment section below. So that's it for today's class. Thank you so much for joining in. Until next time, take care.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.